and where that issue currently stands in the state. Thanks for joining us on News Channel 5 at 6. I'm Brooke Buford, and one of Central Louisiana's most notorious cases is back in the spotlight. At the center of it, convicted killer Larry Roy, who was one of 56 inmates on death row to ask for a commuted sentence and what's been described as an 11th-hour attempt to get the governor to give him life in prison before he leaves office. The future of that clemency attempt is now in limbo after the pardon board removed the applications off the docket based on an opinion from the Attorney General. But it remains to be seen if the governor will direct the board to hear them. Here's where everything currently stands on that matter. Sally Richard is living a nightmare.
And it messes with me at night. I have nightmares and I'm scared.
On May 3rd, 1993, her ex-boyfriend Larry Roy broke into her Cheneyville home and stabbed her ex-husband, Freddie Richard Jr., to death. He then turned the knife on Richard and her two boys. They survived, managing to escape to call for help. But before Roy was through, he stabbed her elderly aunt, Rosetta Silas, to death. News of Roy's arrest grabbed headlines, dubbed by police and media at the time as the Cheneyville slasher. A little over a year later, a Rapides Parish jury found him guilty and sentenced him to death, and he's been on death row ever since.
He deserves to be on death row for what he did to us.
While there hasn't been an execution in Louisiana since 2010, in June, Roy joined a group of 56 inmates on death row to file an application for clemency. They asked Governor Bel Edwards for a life sentence before he leaves office. Edwards has publicly opposed the death penalty.
In short, it's very difficult to administer. We've had one execution in 20 years. It's extremely expensive. Tens of millions of dollars more spent prosecuting these cases and defending these capital cases than would have otherwise been the case. And tens of millions of dollars more just maintaining death row in our prison system. And we all know our criminal justice system is far from perfect, but the death penalty is final. Over the same 20 years when we've executed one person, there have been 6 exonerations from death row.
Word of the application shocked the Richard family.
I was angry. They need to consider the family, the victims.
The Rapides Parish District Attorney's Office feared a commuted death sentence could be commuted even more.
I can't look my victims in the face and guarantee that if they were given clemency to life, there is no guarantee that after 5 years, their sentence couldn't be commuted to a term.
Tracy Lee, a Fort Polk soldier who broke into a Natchitoches home on June 15th, 1985, and shot a 15-year-old boy to death before sexually assaulting the child's sister and mother, also applied for clemency. District Attorney Billy Joe Harrington said he had to notify the victim's family that the case was being expedited.
That those 56 had leapfrogged over 440 pending applications. I explained to them that the rules had been relaxed, time periods had been shortened, and we really had to put on our seatbelt and get after this. With them being thrust into this procedure, it just opened their wounds again.
In a turn of events, last week, the Board of Pardons and Parole sent every application back based on an opinion by Attorney General Jeff Landry. According to Landry, the board can ignore its existing policy, which will not allow it to consider a request after a year passes from an appeal ruling. And since no death dates are set in the cases, it doesn't meet the threshold for an exception. Lauren Lampert is the executive director of the Louisiana District Attorneys Association, the group that assists DAs on issues like this one. He's optimistic the governor won't bend the rules.
I think he sees the law and the rules exactly like the rest of us do, and that is, while he likely has the authority to order them to place something on the docket, the term notwithstanding any other provision that is contained within that rule means as long as it doesn't violate any other rule. So if there's another rule that would prohibit them from being heard, not properly heard, I don't think anybody would think that the governor has the authority to order them to violate their own rules.
The Capital Appeals Project, a nonprofit law firm, represents Larry Roy. We wanted to know the law office's next steps in Roy's case and the others it represents after the applications were sent back. They declined to comment. As the waiting game continues in the state for those on both sides of the issues, Sally Richard just hopes victims and survivors aren't forgotten and that judicial promises are kept.
He don't deserve life in prison. He deserved to be on death row because what he did to us, he killed 2 people and he said he was going to try to kill everybody.
And I reached out to the governor's office to see if they would be able to provide an update on what the governor may do now that the clemency applications have been denied, and the future of the matter is in limbo, especially as time ticks on the governor's term. The governor's office did not provide an update. It's time to get a first look at today's weather. We're going to